Great. So as Scott mentioned, my name is Ben Carlson, and I'm a grad student of Walter Yetz. And I'm going to be talking to you today about a project that I call remote sensing for animal movement. So this project is more kind of just an idea right now, and so we're really looking for feedback from you guys. But we do have some initial data that we can show you, so wait for that to the end. Let's see if I got this right. Okay, so there's an astounding variety of movements across the animal kingdom. So this ranges from a snail pitching its way across a log, all the way to an article I just read where a bar-tailed godwit traveled continuously 13,000 kilometers, which is astounding. So there's a lot of variation, but many movements are in response to ephemeral or very fine grain specific environments. And these are often environments that are not captured by remote sensing data or traditional remote sensing products. But when we put trackers on animals, we can often see the signature of those ephemeral environments in the spatial data. So I feel like you guys are getting a lot of white stork examples here. That's just because objectively they are the best animal.
Have you seen one?
It's true, they might not exist. Scott's making up all the data. So I'm showing you here the same field on 3 consecutive days. And you can see that on the first day, there's no activity. On the second day, so each of these points is a GPS location, and the colors indicate different individuals. So they're very interested in this field. On the third day, they're over it. So this was always a field the whole time, but something about this changed. So some of you probably know what probably happened. This is probably what happened. So storks are strongly attracted to farmers that are mowing their fields, and this is because as they mow, it makes invertebrates and small vertebrates much more available to them. So Martin's done some cool research that shows that they actually can smell the volatiles of the grass coming off the cutting, and then they'll swoop down and follow along the tractor and like snatch up any snacks that kind of pop out. So this is just one of the many ephemeral or fine-grained habitats that's often captured by the movement data, but not by the remote sensing products. And so Johnson's selection framework is a nice way to think about what our data can tell us. And so Johnson proposed 4 orders of selection. So the first one would be the species range level. The second one would be selection of home ranges within the species ranges. Third order is patches within the species range, and fourth order is food items within the patch. And if we think about what our movement data can tell us, we could know every 5 minutes or sometimes every second where an animal is located in space. And so this tells us a lot about patch level selection and even at times what they're eating most likely. But if we look at the traditional remote sensing products, these tell us a lot about species range level selection and home range level selection, but often don't get down to the level of patches or food items. And this gap right here is the focus of remote sensing for animal movement, this project. And so why does this gap even exist? So if you guys saw Ryan's talk yesterday, it's probably not just sensor capability. So, as Ryan mentioned, the movement ecologist and space agencies probably aren't communicating as effectively as they should be. But this is something we should address because, as Walter mentioned, and you guys probably know, there's a lot of really cool new sensors and new techniques that are coming out that could really address some of the issues that movement ecologists are facing. And so just as an example of that, going back to storks and mowed fields, when I first started talking to stork biologists, they told me about, storks love to follow around tractors, but you'll never get that from the movement data, or from the remote sensing data. But then I started looking at the remote sensing literature, and I found out that there are actually existing techniques using existing sensors that we could actually detect mowing events. And so this is exactly the sort of information and data that we want to convey over to movement ecologists. So what is remote sensing for animal movement? We've defined it as remote sensing of environments at resolutions commensurate with common grains of movement data. So we often think about fine spatial grain, but this includes other things like greater resolution in temporal, vertical, structural, or taxonomic. And generally, these are going to be at finer grains than what's available in traditional remote sensing products. And as we talked about, this is really associated with sort of these fine scale selections, so selection of patches or food items. So the overall goals of the project are to advance the use of remote sensing in movement ecology, wildlife biology, and conservation management. And the first step we want to do is publish a perspective paper. And so this is the team right now. Diego, Calcadan, Benny, and Alex are all also part of the S Lab and probably all in this room. And you guys both know, or all know, Antonio and Brian, who are with the JPL. So in terms of audiences, as I mentioned, we want to tell movement ecologists about this amazing promise and opportunity of remote sensing, but we also want to convey to the remote sensing community and the space agencies that there's this significant unmet need from the remote sensing community, or from the movement ecology community. So the paper has three major components that we're working on right now. First of all, we're gathering requirements. So we are talking to movement ecologists, and we're just asking them, like, what do you wish you had? And then we're taking those requirements, and we are performing a gap analysis. So, given these requirements, which can be met by current sensors, upcoming sensors, or which can't be met at all. And then finally, I think we need to kind of rethink how we're doing layer distribution. So a lot of these layers are very species-specific, region-specific, context-specific. And this common practice of releasing sort of general global layers is probably not going to be, it probably isn't going to work in this case. So we've performed a small pilot study just to kind of see how this would shake out. We interviewed 6 movement ecologists, we used our own natural history knowledge, and we included some literature sources, and this resulted in a total of 48 habitats. So I'll show you some very preliminary analysis, but take this all with a grain of salt, because this was basically like people we do in North America, so not representative. And this is the sort of information that we gathered. So natural history knowledge, so things like what's the description of the habitat, what resource is the animal going after, what behavior are they engaging in while they're selecting the habitat, and then importantly, scale information. So this is things like temporal grain, spatial grain, vertical grain, and this is going to connect to the sensor capabilities, which will help us perform the gap analysis. And this is just 3 examples of the types of habitats that we've heard from. So first, bears are really attracted to acorn mast in the fall. Turkeys will use early successional vegetation, but will avoid middle and late successional vegetation. And Canada geese are strongly attracted to cornfields only after they've been harvested, because they're after the waste grain that's in the field. So we took all of these sort of very detailed habitats and put them into different categories. And this is a count of the number of habitats per category. So what's really interesting is that vegetation structure was by far the most important type of habitat to ecologists, followed by vegetation phenology and then some things about dynamic water availability. And then we performed a gap analysis, as I described, and this is kind of cool. So it shows that of the wish list, we could actually, it's feasible to do 40% of those right now with current space-based sensors. So this isn't really sensor capacity in this case. This is more of a communication or resource issue. If we add airborne sensors, we can increase that to 80%. But airborne is not scalable, but it can also be an indication of what could eventually go into space. And then 20% of the habitats we just didn't think were feasible at all with any sort of technology. And so the last idea is sort of how do we get these layers into the hands of ecologists? And so one idea is instead of releasing sort of these general layers, we could release the scripts that are used to generate the layers. And then these could be tuned to specific regions or contexts by the people that want to use them. Or people don't want to fiddle around with code. I can't see why, but there could be web apps for exporting the layers. Or maybe people don't need the layers at all. They just need their data annotated with the layers that in question. And so this is something where something like Stoat would come in. Walter talked about that earlier. Or we could sort of recognize that this stuff is hard, and we really need remote sensing scientists and movement ecologists to work closely together. And so just some ideas of how we could promote that is we could have some sort of a grant call that would require movement ecologists and remote sensing scientists to be on the same team solving some problem. Or we could fold some sort of requirements into like a future avarice mission or something like that. So that's kind of where we're at with the project now. And as I mentioned, we're really looking for feedback. So anything is on the table. Is this even a useful project? Are we taking the right approach? Are we collecting the information? And I know that many of you often wear a wildlife biologist, ecologist hat, and so we'd really like to talk to you and ask you, like, what is it that you would really like to see in remote sensing products? So just to conclude, RSAM is focused on this gap between what we can sort of sense from the movement data and what the common remote sensing products characterize. And I've actually, leading up to this, I've heard a lot of people express concerns about this gap, and so this is really to say that we hear you, and what we're trying to do is quantify and summarize this information, and so this can go up to decision makers that can actually put resources towards this. And then so just in terms of findings, we found that vertical structure is by far the most important type of habitat. And what's cool is 40% of the requirements can be met with current space-based sensors. So I'd just like to thank everyone who's provided input to this project and funding sources, and there's my email, but obviously talk to me. I'd love to hear from you. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I can